All right, good morning, everybody. Today is Friday, November 20th, 2015, and this is Before the First Cup of Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Friday, everybody. Is it really Friday again? Man, these days just keep cruising by as fast as they can. It is 42 degrees and very overcast here in upstate New York. Chilly, fall-y, nappy, good type of weather. Oh, so where do we leave off? Yesterday, we titled the show, and I'm really struggling with where I want to take the show today. Toyota, DARPA, Samsung, robots take our jobs. And I think I illustrated pretty well that the whole robots taking our jobs mantra is not really a fantasy. It appears that we are moving full steam ahead globally with the manufacture, testing, and ever improving robotics and artificial intelligence and software that is going to pretty much put us all out of jobs at some point here in the future. And it doesn't look like it's going to be 100 years from now, and that's the scary part. Japan, South Korea, China, they were all getting into the game, and then add all of our universities and then the military-industrial complex on top of it. And there's a pretty ugly picture forming here. So I'm not sure if I want to continue on. I had some good stuff about Samsung that we really could dig into. Samsung has, did you know that Samsung has a whole military arm? I was talking to my friend last night, the one that we dug into the hierarchy of Toyota once before, a long, long time ago, and looked at some of the other Japanese companies, because a lot of these are where they pass down leadership within the company throughout a family. And someone had even pointed that out in chat, that when I had kind of laughed about Toyota being run by someone named Toyota, it's because he is somehow down the chain of the original family. But anyway, so Samsung, and maybe we'll continue here and then we'll just kind of flip over. Samsung apparently also has a military arm. My friend was telling me so does Mitsubishi, which I did not know, but I guess. It's a good way to hide military is in the manufacturing of consumer products. I mean, we have a lot of the high performance car companies in Germany that do things like make jet engines, right? They make all kinds of stuff for the military, so pretty interesting. Yeah, here, we'll read this. The military department, you did not know that Samsung had. And what's so important about this is that we looked at this new relationship, and you know what, we should touch on this quick. This new relationship that doesn't look like it's too new, but it's $1 billion new here in the United States, with Toyota opening their advanced technology division. I don't remember exactly what they called it. Oh, I don't know. It's some new division that's going to be for research and development and all these new robotics. It's maybe their artificial intelligence center, something like that. Yeah, Toyota invests $1 billion in artificial intelligence in Silicon Valley to lead in robotics. We found out the guy that's been hired to run the whole thing is a former DARPA manager or director of some kind. And if I can get down there quick, I found something interesting I wanted to share. God, by the end of the week, there's just so many different tangents of stories that we've gone down. And they're all open in different forms and posted. All right, here's a press release. I thought it was interesting because they actually outlined what this dude's jobs were when he was over in DARPA. If it loads. I got that slow disease too now by Friday. Every machine is on syrup. All right, yeah. So the guy now that is running the $1 billion Toyota facility that is in California, right near, I don't know, one of the lizard's dens, and right near MIT in Massachusetts, says that the the guy who was running this Toyota Institute, the former manager, program manager at DARPA, obtained his doctorate degree in electrical engineering and computer science at MIT. Then he taught at MIT. Then he established 3 startups between 1983 and 2005. Then he worked as program manager in projects such as neuromorphic systems in robotics, including the DARPA Robotics Challenge from 2010 to 2015. Now, where do we know about the DARPA Robotics Challenge? Oh, yes. There was the one where the robots, the Atlas robot was in it, remember? And then Atlas got sold to Google and whatever. So lots of big scaries in that robotics challenge. Significant. Don't believe any of the humorous videos they put out. They're like, oh, look at the robots fall down. Everyone point and laugh because they're not that advanced. But guess what, guys? They really are. I think that whole robotics challenge was to allay people's fears. They want everybody to feel so warm and fuzzy about robots, and they've been pulling that psychology for a while. You know, these are all supposed to be rescue robots. And a lot of the stuff that they're testing right now, they want to be able to use for disasters such as Fukushima, because, you know, all the Japanese robots that they're making to go into the nuclear power plants were malfunctioning from the extremely high radiation levels. It was one of the challenges after they started this competition that they decided they were going to work on, but also for search and recovery after a natural disaster. Of course, that's what they always tell us. Firefighting, there's that Valkyrie robot we've seen. There's a new NASA robot they're going to be using for space missions. I saw Iran, I'm sure Iran's not part of the robotics challenge, but I saw Iran just release some pretty scary looking humanoid-esque robot as well. So it's definitely coming. So how interesting. We have this former DARPA program manager that's now been hired to run this $1 billion new AI startup from Toyota. You know, I don't know. They pick the most perfect people. And the other thing I was noticing too is like, look at how this is all panning out here. They're like cherry picking out of DARPA and then placing these, they're almost like agents within these new or newly connected companies, so they have their tentacles in the door. It frightens me. DARPA really frightens me, and that's why we zero in on them frequently, because really they're like, oh yes, we spend your tax dollars to spur innovation, and we sprinkle your tax dollars at universities for mad science experiments because it's going to create the next best things that are going to happen in the future. And hey, by the way, we created the internet, so pisha. They pull that crap all the time, but I don't know. I think DARPA, especially when the DARPA lady was talking about creating synthetic life with any traits out of any organism with the push of a button, I would have to say that it's Danger Will Robinson. All right, anyway, back to this guy. So what did this guy do? This, what was his name? PPP, Pratt. Gil Pratt. Dr. Gil Pratt. So he ran DARPA's neuromorphic systems and robotics, including the DARPA Robotics Challenge from 2010 to 2015. He significantly influenced robotics research by leading the DARPA Robotics Challenge, where humans and robots collaborated for disaster response. Yes, shoulder to shoulder. Let's make sure that we embrace our digital brethren. No, thank you. You know my thoughts on robots. I'd love to step on a Jibo. A couple of the awards Dr. Pratt has won: DARPA's Program Manager of the Year in 2014. Whew! Aren't we glad that he left and he's coming to work for the new $1 billion AI facility at Toyota? He also won the DARPA Results That Matter 2013 award and the National Science Foundation Career Award of 1998. I just wanted to kind of outline that so you had some idea who this Mr. Pratt is. Yesterday, we pretty much just knew that he had formerly worked at DARPA. So there you go. But yeah, so now we have this DARPA Toyota connection. And literally, the story that we read yesterday had intertwined. I mean, we literally have every one of the Lizard's Nest agencies involved here. We got, of course, DARPA, which is your Department of Defense, but we also had like Stanford University, MIT. Yeah, here, Toyota Motor Corp said Friday that it'll start operating in January with 200 employees in Silicon Valley near Stanford, with a second facility near the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge. So DARPA, MIT, and Stanford, which just sounds so great to me. I mean, this really is where all of the mad science is coming out of right now and where a lot of the money is going. So anyway, all right. So now let's fast forward. We talked about Samsung. We talked about automation. Samsung is developing this army of robots in South Korea to help the Chinese factories who are having trouble competing with the global market and their $3 an hour employees. I think we heard them say yesterday on an assembly line where they were making computer mice, they were able to make with humans, took 40 humans to make 800 mice an hour, I believe is what he said. And with the new robotics, they now only need 10 people to make 800 mice an hour, basically cutting that workforce by 3/4. Yeah, absolutely incredible. And, you know, as we look at some of these device manufacturer companies, I talked about the relationship between Google and Samsung. And, you know, after the show, because we'd seen a few videos where Larry Page had come out and he talked about what a beautiful friendship, and he and Samsung, and we're all excited over their smart appliances and the Android operating system. Well, it looks like there's been a falling out, and a lot of it seems to do with licensing as well as the fact that they are pretty fierce competitors now that the prices of phones are coming down, cheap phones, because that's what Samsung makes, expensive phones. And Samsung was working on their own operating system as well, so the relationship seems to have soured a little. Samsung also is working on their own kind of version of the Internet of Things and how they're going to do home automation. And we talked about a few weeks ago Google buying that Nest company, that security and heating and cooling company. I don't know what they were, some sort of like automated temperature controlling and security surveillance for your home. Of course, Google's going to have eyes and ears on your house with that one. But again, connecting all into the Internet of Things, but it looks like Samsung's doing it differently. So again, another big poke in the eye. So there's this rivalry going on, Dory, as we once thought, which is interesting. But what I did find out is that they are still friendly. And if I can find this here quick, I don't know. I was having the syrupy slow disease this morning. Not me personally, though that happens. But on the computer, like just everything. And I could have done what I usually have to end up doing, which is shut every tab and reboot the machine and then find all my links again. And do you know how painful that is, especially when there's only 15 minutes to air? So I'm just suffering through the painfully slow SERP computer right now. All right, let's look at this. So, you know, one of the things that I've enjoyed is trying to connect some of these companies that influence our lives to either DARPA or Google or the feds. But, whatever, DARPA or Google. If you can connect them, it's like the 7, what's it called? The 7 ways to bacon. JJ had a good one. The 7 slice and dices to Google. If I can find a way to connect them to Google or DARPA, then there's something nefarious afoot. So anyway, Samsung and Google, a beautiful friendship. This was from a few weeks ago. Samsung Electronics Company, a South Korea-based maker of electronic devices. And the reason why this is important is because I was just reading, like, a large majority of the phones, 70, 60, 70, 78%. Android, and then 24.6% of all those Android phones, all of them in the world, 24.6, almost 25% are Samsung. 25% of the Android operating system phones in the world are Samsung. So Samsung has a pretty significant market, and it's kind of funny because now it's sort of like, well, play nice with Google or else. So anyway, Samsung Electronics, South Korean-based maker of electronic devices, offers device solutions for businesses and products in consumer electronics, information technology, and mobile communications. Now, a few things they don't mention are, of course, their military arm, and we're going to talk about that. But also, there's a super secret cell phone program working on it with, ding, 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 Samsung. Yeah, I found a good story about that yesterday. So I think that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to expose Samsung and DARPA. The company, which began in 1938, is most recently known for its mobile devices Galaxy S and Galaxy Note, which are two of the most popular smartphones selling today. And yeah, from everything I've seen, I know a few people that have them. They're pretty nice. Really HD cameras and some really cool features. The device operates on the Android operating system developed by Google. And while Google is well known for its search engine and has many other business components like YouTube, Google Maps, Wise, blah, blah, blah. But the relationship is not as straightforward as Samsung hardware using Google software. Several other agreements and ventures have come out of this marriage. And this is telling you about like how wonderful the relationship is now. So I'm wondering if the stories about them not getting along hurt some consumer confidence as well as their stock. Why they spin one of these to say, look at how great we are. Look at how we're working together so nicely. Google apps are crucial to helping Samsung stay competitive with its number one smartphone arch rival, ding, 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 Apple. And in October 2015, Google added podcasts to its Play Music feature, making it more similar with Apple iTunes. Google's Android OS is used in several manufacturers' mobile devices, but Samsung devices have by far the largest market share. And in the first quarter of 2015, Android devices held a 78% share of the marketplace, and Samsung had the largest share of any smartphone manufacturer with 24.6%, according to the International Data Corporation. And since Google divested, and we've asked this question a bunch of times, so here's the answer. Since Google divested in Motorola's businesses, the Motorola division was sold in 2014. So thank you, whoever out there. And I think it was Hecty that had actually told me that there was a separation between Motorola and Google. So Hecty, thank you, because now I found, yes, Motorola no longer is affiliated with Google. The ties between Samsung and Google have become even greater. While the Android OS agreement is the main component of the partnership, there are other aspects that generate revenue. For example, online revenue is a strong generator for Google and Samsung products, much more of it compared to Google's other mobile manufacturer relationships. And this mobile ad revenue generates strong streams for Google. And the percentage shared with Samsung has been a reported bone of contention between the two parties. In fact, media sources have speculated that since 2013, the relationship will turn contentious if Samsung does not receive a higher cut. So they're fighting over like marketing and ad revenue as well. Another more recent development in the relationship is a patent share 10-year agreement. This agreement was signed in 2014, and it allows Samsung and Google to gain access to each other's industry-leading patent portfolios, paving the way for deeper collaborations on research and development of current and future products and technologies. Now, that's pretty significant. So they inked a 10-year deal last year in 2014 to basically open up the vaults and let each of them rummage around and have full-blown access to their entire patent portfolio to create mad science projects. And one of the things you got to remember here, too, is as we go down the path of Google Life Sciences and Alphabet and all this genomic stuff and mental health stuff and smart apps to diagnose mental diseases and all this other crazy shit, biosensors in your phone, Google has a cell phone manufacturer in their pocket, namely Samsung, who does all kinds of battle-ready mobile phone smart device testing with DARPA and has their own military arm. And remember, Google bought eight large robotics companies that were all involved with the military last year. This is kind of a strange relationship. We'll dig more because I really want to know more. This scares me. I mean, we have these tech titans, tech companies from all over the world who, on their smiley, happy, shiny face, dangling carrot, become addicted with your dopamine to your device every 37 seconds that you got to check your email. But what's behind all this? Know your enemy. Anyway, finally, in the latest collaborative effort, Samsung and Google have forayed into the enterprise business and the security aspects of mobile computing. Remember, good old DARPA Dan's at Google now, too. Ding, ding, ding. DARPA Dan was the one who was working on the security for the Internet of Things. Samsung and Google announced in 2014 that their collaboration to address the needs for a secure mobile platform that ensures privacy without compromising experiences. The VP of Android from Google noted that Samsung's Knox, Knox, the only Android provider of what? Oh, defense grade and government certified mobile security, will bring enterprise grade security and management capabilities to all manufacturers participating in the Android ecosystem. And yes, those Knox, I believe, are the same mobile Samsung devices that they are using with DARPA on the battlefield, that they call them ruggedized, so you can drop them in a mud puddle and they still work. Or be in the battlefield. Google and Samsung have more than a hardware-software relationship. Of course, they had revenue sharing, yes. Patent co-licensing agreements. It's kind of like a marriage contract. Participation in open source projects and continued collaborations that set the standards for future mobile computing in both enterprise and leisure, as well as security, are driving these two technology behemoths to define and lead mobile computing of the future. So somebody that Google has given full and open free reign to access for 10 years, their entire library of patents to make fun, crazy stuff. I think we got to pay attention to. Okay, so let me now find, here we go, the story about the military department that you did not know that Samsung had. I know I didn't. Apple's biggest smartphone competitor also makes tanks and jet engines. Billed as promoting peace and stability. Samsung TechWin is the South Korean manufacturer's defense branch. It makes surveillance. Oh, I'm so glad I'm buying phones from some military surveillance manufacturer. God, it makes surveillance, aeronautics, automation, and weapons technology. And since its launch into the defense industry in 1983, Samsung TechWin has developed and produced artillery systems like the 155 millimeter self-propelled Howitzer M109A2. I think that's the tank in the picture up above. The K9 Thunder, the K10 ammunition resupply vehicle, fire direction center vehicles, amphibious other weapons, according to Samsung. Samsung TechWin's flagship K9 tank is currently being used by Poland, Turkey, and South Korea. It says, oh, watch the tank's impressive agility below. Which I don't think we're going to watch that. K9 tank becomes even more impressive when combined with the K10 ammunition resupply vehicle, and the K10 pulls up behind the K9 and autonomously feeds more ammunition into the K9, eliminating the need of resupplying the vehicle by hand, which minimizes the risk of troop exposure. Together, they create an automated weapon system for the field. So I'll tell you what, go Samsung. So glad that we found out you have this other military branch. So as I'm digging into that, I started questioning then what these ruggedized phones were. Well, check this out. This one came out of Gizmodo. It's from August, just over a year ago, August 5th of 2014. And I don't know if we're going to read the beginning of this because this guy just like gives us the step-by-step of what it's like finding DARPA, though it might be good. Inside the military's secretive smartphone program. That should make you go, what? Yes, what? When I recently set out, and this isn't me, this is the Gizmodo dude, Adam Clark Estes. When I recently set out for the Pentagon's R&D department, I instead found myself in front of a downtrodden shopping mall in Arlington, Virginia. I've been navigating the old-fashioned way with my eyes, but when I pulled out my smartphone, there it was, clearly marked on the Google Map app, DARPA. Turns out that the unmarked spaceship of a structure that DARPA calls home is tucked neatly behind the Ballston Common Mall. And when I eventually found the right entrance and stepped inside the lobby, everything suddenly felt familiar. Clean lines, shiny surfaces, would look right at home at the office of any number of large tech companies I visited. Metal detectors, however, would not. And the security desk promptly snatched my smartphone before I headed for the elevators, which also they wouldn't do in most startups whose executives are just as tethered to their devices as teenagers with bad Snapchat habits. And yeah, isn't everybody telling you, dangling carrot, man? It is an addiction. And it's an addiction that they know fully all about. That dopamine is something that DARPA's been studying for a long time, and our reaction to it and how connected we are. Of course, most tech companies aren't tasked with developing weapons of warfare like super strong humanoid robots and drones that fly out of mothership submarines. Yes, we've talked about all those. Don't worry about it. Let's just go for lunch. DARPA, of course, does a lot more than weapons. However, the same government agency that, and here we go, we're invoking it again, invented the internet and laid the groundwork for America's thriving startup culture is, yes, the lunatics gone absolutely, utterly mad. Anyone for $1 can create a new life form, remember, ding. And laid the groundwork for America's thriving startup culture is now trying to act more like a startup itself. Put simply, DARPA is making smartphones battlefield ready so that soldiers can take full advantage of the same mobile technology that's improved the lives of countless of civilians in recent years. And, one of the things I was reading about when they first started developing these smartphone applications is that this was part of this autonomous drone bombing program. I know one of them was where they literally could do triangulation on their phones so they could be mobile wherever they are and get rid of some of those clunky radios they used to have to call and give the signal over one of their wireless radios to bomb. And now they can just hit the green button on their happy little cell phone. It says for the military, a hulking institution riddled with red tape and bound by bureaucracy that is no easy task, but a nimble team of developers and researchers at DARPA have spent the last few years laying the groundwork for an app ecosystem called Transformative Apps Program that could change the way the United States fights wars. You can sort of think of it like an app store for the military, where all of the offerings are designed to work in hyper-secure environments and often without a reliable network connection. It is harder than it sounds. DARPA program manager Doran Michaels walked out of the elevator with a purpose, flanked by a public relations team clutching what appeared to be his lunch in both hands. He wore his hair short and a smile wide. Yes, the DARPA man was smiling. Make sure you put that in the article. His smile was wide, and he almost didn't break stride when we shook hands and turned to leave DARPA's glistening headquarters. We're going off-site, he told the security guards, and I got my smartphone back. As the head of DARPA's Trans App program, Dorans have been on the front lines of the military's battle to apply the undeniable utility of consumer smartphone technology and adapt it for use by the tactical company. And this is no small challenge since the vast majority of soldiers still depend on brick-sized radios and paper maps to navigate the battlefield. And yeah, a lot of those radios actually come from a military contractor here in Rochester, Harris Communications. They make a lot of military radios. However, it is a challenge that Doran could not be more enthusiastic about spearheading. All right. The smartphone is a big deal, he told me as we walked past the mall and toward another unmarked building. Oh, you better run. I wouldn't be walking anywhere with a DARPA man, especially in some downtrodden old abandoned mall toward another unmarked building. What are you thinking? Says, I don't know that we will ever completely grasp the implications of how we're learning to access and share information. These are big and transformative things in human evolution, he says. Well, you hear that sort of thing all the time from startup founders convinced that their app or gadget is more disruptive than the next. Though, when the DARPA guy tells you that it's transformative, what they're working on is so transformative, it's like human evolution. Because it is. This whole transhumanized, push a button, make life thing is just the tip of the iceberg. Says, you hear that sort of thing all the time from startup founders convinced that their app or gadget is what? Oh, more disruptive than the next. And yes, we spent many days talking about disruptive technologies. Turns everything on its head. But to hear a Department of Defense guy get fired up about the boundless horizons of the Android operating system, DARPA Google, and wax hopeful about Samsung's rugged new smartphone was a new experience. So that's the first let on that, yes, Samsung and their ruggedized military phones are working with DARPA. But wait, it gets better. Doran went on to explain why the awesome technology that Silicon Valley sells to as normal simply will not work for the tactical community, especially for the soldiers fighting in Afghanistan. These devices, well, I don't know how many cell phones work in Afghanistan either. These devices work mostly because the network they're connected to also works, right? And take that away, which the mass majority of combat troops do not have access to it, and you are left with a really expensive calculator. So just think of how useless your smartphone is when you can't get a signal. It's like that all the time for soldiers. However, if you could build a secure network, one that troops could actually use in the most remote stretches of wilderness and the most war-torn cities or countries, even the simplest of smartphone functions would be a tremendous tool, not only for communicating, but also for other simple tasks that are quickly complicated in battlefield scenarios. The ability to view and manipulate maps in real time, for instance, is clearly a step up from the existing paper and pencil approach, which many soldiers currently rely. And yes, of course, smartphones would also be great communication tools, especially compared to the old brick-sized radios soldiers now use. So, the Pentagon launched the Transformative Apps program under the DARPA umbrella, the Trans App mission, and I can guarantee you if there's an Android operating system involved and some sort of smartphone, we got good old Regina Duggan as part of the smart cell phone mobile app division of Google. Good old Regina Duggan, former director of DARPA, so I'm sure that they're very tightly connected there. Anyway, the TransApp mission, as stated on DARPA's website, is to, quote, develop a diverse array of military-relevant software applications using an innovative new development and acquisition process. The hardware itself is basically the same as what everyday Americans are walking around with every day. The big difference comes in as to how they're connected, and since civilian networks cannot be trusted, soldiers must constantly set up secure networks on the fly using a suite of radios and networking equipment. Accordingly, TransApp developed a system that soldiers could plug smartphones into and gain basic connectivity, and the corresponding apps are also designed to maintain functionality even when they go offline. Doran, this is the DARPA guy, told me the history of TransApp the way a proud father talks about his family. Yes. Paint the DARPA guy with a happy face. And the program started in 2010 with a budget of $79 million over 4 years. So it was during Regina Duggan's reign. It says, of course, that's not a lot of money for a military with a total budget of over $500 billion. And TransApp saw its first action in 2011 when 3,000 systems were deployed in Afghanistan, where Doran says that the program received overwhelmingly positive feedback. The Army troops that were testing the apps used a variety of different devices depending on specific tasks. But Doran told me that the military settled on consumer-ready smartphones rather than going through the rigmarole of designing their own proprietary technology. And all of the devices that Doran showed me in the TransApp's office were, Samsungs. Ding! In the years since, TransApps has been used for everything from training soldiers to improving security at the Boston Marathon. Oh, really? And the presidential inauguration. Oh. And Doran's particularly proud of the integration in Boston a few months ago, since the and this was from a year ago, so it must have been after the Boston bombing. Since the high-profile event depends on the complicated coordination of several local and national agencies. Everyone from the FBI to the Boston Fire Department needed to know what everyone else was doing, and the same types of apps that kept the soldiers organized in the battlefield happen to work perfectly here. Hey! Now let's get DARPA and Samsung to start rolling out all these technologies to our first responders, the FBI, alphabet agencies, and police departments. Sounds like a great idea. Because remember, nation of insurgents, it seems to me. So, if we can't have soldiers on the streets, let's get some soldier smart apps on the cell phones. All right, everyone from the FBI to the Boston Fire Department needed to know what everyone else was doing, and the same types of apps that keep the soldiers organized in the battlefield worked perfectly there. You can see from a screenshot of the app they were using, and it is a very detailed, high-resolution mapping application, it appears, that says unclassified across the top. Good thing. Phew. You can see from the screenshot of the app that they were using where the specific units, as well as the checkpoints, ding, are located and how an officer in the field could search and sort for more granular information. By the time Doran had finished his backstory, we left the sweltering heat outside and found our way into a curious office. Oh, run, Bobby, run! The sign outside the door definitely did not say DARPA, though it is unclear if that was intentional or not. It was some 3-letter acronym, and if I remember correctly, but the name was forgettable enough that I'm not sure I do. So he doesn't even give you the 3-letter acronym they were using. So you couldn't find him in the downtrodden mall. Inside, we turned right into a sizable conference room where a mannequin, stood guard in army fatigues. I would have shit myself. Oh, my God. This was no ordinary set of fatigues, though. Strapped to the fake soldier's flak jacket was a sand-colored case, roughly the size of a lunchbox, but much thinner. And once I saw the attached stylus, I knew that it was for a smartphone or a tablet. This particular case held a white Samsung Galaxy Note, a device that DARPA researchers would later tell me is one of their favorites. The case enables soldiers to keep both hands free while looking down at the screen, and also plugs into and can keep the devices running for a solid week. It was all custom built, all except for the chunk of plastic with the Samsung logo on it. I mean, if this isn't evidence that there's like complete and utter collaboration between Samsung and DARPA, I don't know what is. The fact that Samsung is building this army of robots, I mean, really, and they have this whole military arm. I'd be keeping my eye on Samsung. And the smart appliance division, don't forget. They're one of the most popular, and they're one of the most popular cell phones, he said. I'm sure that the federal government finds lots of use with their relationship with Samsung. The end user device, of course, is the most important, Doran told me, and he went on to explain how the government's attempts to build its own smartphone simply didn't work. And the way that he explained the situation, it seemed kind of silly that they would even try, since all the devices that were already on the consumer market worked well enough for millions of people to use on a daily basis. And furthermore, soldiers were already familiar with the consumer devices. The TransApp team just figures out which of the existing devices fit the specific needs of a particular mission and how, if at all, they need to modify the device. So for the hardware, we constantly have a roster. We've gotten stuff on deck ready to jump when we needed to. We put stuff in the ovens and we put stuff under the spotlight to see how good the screen brightness is and so on. And based on how we describe them, these are not typical tests that the phones would see in the Samsung R&D department. Doran added, we have to be very dynamic and we don't necessarily plan to give everyone all the same thing, but they all need to work together. So to do so, everything runs on a highly modified version of the Android operating system. And of course, Google is right in bed with DARPA, so no problems there. And the more we talked about the networking technology, the more things started flying over my head. I heard of wave relay radios before, for example, but I had a hard time following how the Army uses them to set up a secure mobile network throughout the city of Kandahar. And I think what they do is like peer-to-peer with those wireless radios, because there's no centralized communication network, so you just have to be within range and you connect and message down the line. By the time Doran showed off radio systems that are designed to fly around on a drone, what? By the time Doran showed off a radio system that is designed to fly around on a drone and pinpoint the location of terrorists based on their cell phone signals, ding, ding, ding. Remember, we talked about that. That's a metadata. They admitted a long time ago that they could pinpoint and target quote-unquote insurgents from their metadata on their cell phone with a drone and drop a bomb on them. It was clear that we were venturing into a level of detail that wasn't exactly cleared for public knowledge. Once the word classified started getting thrown around, I snuck out the door, is what I'd be doing. I came to the stark realization that, as impressive as it was, all of this technology wasn't just developed to protect our soldiers in combat. Some of it was developed to help us kill better. Yes, Johnny. Transapps isn't about making iPhones that shoot holograms, unfortunately. It's about creating a whole new process of innovation, not only for the Pentagon, but also for the entire tactical community, including law enforcement and rescue operations. And these men and women with extremely difficult jobs that require a fundamentally different set of tools. In the past, developing new ways of communicating and new ways of doing things required multiple levels of oversight, in part because security is such a big concern. And looking forward, however, folks like Doran are trying to adapt the model that consumer technology uses to create such amazing products to work in a tactical environment. And if a soldier or police officer has an idea for an app that would make his job easier, he should have a way to build it. And so, as the Trans Apps nears the end of its funding, and it did in 2014, it is focused on creating that workflow so that development of these types of apps can continue in different tactical communities, from military to law enforcement. So everything made more sense once I started meeting members of the team. Man, like, who is this guy? So they just like open their arms and let Gizmodo in and drop their pants, let him meet everybody, and Aunt Sally. We walked away from the awkwardly empty conference room, past the coffee machine, and past a small bomb-diffusing robot in the bullpen. And there, in the shadow of a giant green android robot painted on the wall, a couple dozen 20-somethings were busy hammering away at code. Yes, there's some of their little code monkeys. And in one corner, a tall kid wearing an Oculus Rift headset careened this way, and like an old man who'd lost his glasses, and he was developing virtual reality training modules for tank drivers. Hey, you know what? That's more of the legacy that good old DARPA Dan left. And yet another girl, wearing what appeared to be a modified version of Google Glasses, stared at her laptop slack-jawed. That wouldn't tell me that she was developing. It was a scene that I had never imagined to see in the Department of Defense. This office actually feels more like an incubator, I said, and this is what we want, said one of the researchers, and they both were smiling. I love the way they keep putting these smiley faces in here, like to paint this big, happy, yellow, round, goofy-looking smiley face on DARPA. Don't be afraid, Johnny. Don't be afraid. Says, yeah, we're not going to do the wood panel computer farm that the DOD probably came from, said Doran. But we are just always exploring how to better evolve and adapt. And we don't want to change for the sake of change. We want to keep getting better. Doran went on to explain how disrupting the Pentagon's workflow was a necessary but tedious task. And while it is okay for someone like Mark Zuckermucker to encourage his employees to break stuff, lives are at stake in some of the scenarios that trans apps confronts. And smartphones are fun and helpful for civilians going to the office and the park and whatnot. But for soldiers to add the extra weight and distraction, they have to make it count. And every ounce of gear they carry counts. Man, the story just goes on. But I think, no, we're not near the end. Oh, my God. It gets even... TransApp runs out of funding this year. And for the most part, the Army will now take over a larger effort that DARPA started to get smartphones in soldiers' hands. That means it'll be up to the troops to develop and maintain these apps. And when DARPA's contracts expire, there's a chance that the Army contract with the same developers will continue working, but there's no guarantee. After we'd done a lap around the office, I finally got to sit down and take a battlefield-ready smartphone for a test drive. And the experience was actually a lot more familiar than I expected. The Samsung device was the exact same Galaxy Note that you would pick up at Best Buy. And while it had certainly some upgrades under the hood, the Android operating system looked pretty much like any other Android operating system that you've seen. And of course, the apps all had colorful icons. Oh my God. Doran pointed me toward the Maps app, which he described as the most important of them all. It looks a little bit like Google Maps, wink, but it does a lot more. Basically, the map serves as a platform on which the phone can run any number of plugins, everything from drawing up mission plans to tracking drones. A related app called Transheat records where the soldiers go so that future missions will know which routes are well traveled and which are uncharted and potentially dangerous. Another called PLI is used to avoid casualties from friendly fire, known in military speak as blue force tracking. And the list goes on and on. There's a ballistics calculator app for snipers, as well as a general guide to weapons and ammunition called WHAM. Debrief makes it easy to compile mission reports on the fly, and Trip Ticket keeps track of Army personnel and inventory. Gamma Pix is for measuring radiation levels. Smart Triage helps medical teams identify and catalog injuries or health problems on the battlefield. And it's as simple as tapping on a human figure, selecting the diagnosis, and recommending a treatment plan. And what's especially important and impressive is that the vast majority of these apps work off the grid. One app that caught my eye is called Who Dat. Who Dat. Doran described it as a soldier-driven picture book, but I like to think of it as a Facebook for war. It lets soldiers study up on who's who before they are deployed and while they're on the battlefield. You can flip the pictures over, put notes on them, and share content as a way for them to keep track, says Doran, and you can separate them into groups: the good guys, the bad guys, friends, targets for reconciliation, and, well, thank God, the UN team. Make sure you put those pictures in there. It wasn't immediately clear to me if all the units took their own pictures of locals and then added them to a central database, but that makes the most sense based on how Doran described the app. It sounds so stupid simple because it is, and just imagine how useful it would be for soldiers to have a basic directory at their fingertips while we're trying to keep track of who they're fighting against and who's on their side. I wonder how that's working in Syria right now. What a mess that is. We don't even know who's who or who's on whose side. Oh, wow, this is a long article, but we're almost done. As we wrap things up at the TransApp headquarters, I realized that Doran hadn't eaten much of the lunch he'd been carrying, and it didn't seem to faze him one bit. I never met a government employee who was so visibly and viscerally excited about what he was doing. and I stuck around a little bit longer to hear Doran tell stories of the time he spent in Afghanistan gathering feedback from soldiers who were using his Transap technology in the field. And just imagine these guys, many of them in their early 20s, who spent the last 5 years with a smartphone in their pocket and suddenly have to go to war with what Doran described as World War II era radios. Now, just imagine how exciting it would be for the Army to give them a Samsung Galaxy instead. And despite Doran's efforts and the progress that Transap has made, our troops will still be carrying those heavy radios for a foreseeable future, and the military will inevitably phase in smartphones as security and budgets allow. However, it is encouraging to see how the military is evolving in how it develops new technology. Ding, 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 a ding, a ding, 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 a ding, ding, ding. Uh-oh, my computer just went to sleep. I'll leave you with one for Friday if I can get there. This is looking at some genomics really quick. Hey, they just discovered gene mutation linked to reckless drunken behavior. Hey, who would have thunk it? That's pretty funny. We've been saying that for years. University of Helsinki has identified a genetic mutation which renders carriers susceptible to particularly impulsive and reckless behavior when becoming drunk. Don't forget, they're going to be profiling all of us. So now the drunk asshole is going to be something in your dossier. All right, guys, make sure you stick around. It is Friday. That means Ms. Lonnie Clark is up next. Josh is live at 6. Primer time. Replay from Tuesday at 8, 9. Truth on the Tracks, 10. Neil Foster at 11 with Levon. Have an awesome weekend, and we'll catch up with you on Monday. Take care.